I am Sarabjit Singh, an IPS officer of the 1965 batch. I joined the SSB in 1969 and served till 1975 in Himachal Pradesh and Arunachal Pradesh. During the 1971 war, I was with the SSB in Himachal in Rampur Bushehr. The Special Services Bureau, as the SSB's full name at that time was an organization that was meant to train the border force, the border population in guerrilla warfare and motivate them so that a repetition of 1962 would not take place in case the Chinese attempted to invade these areas. The people were trained, motivated, equipped, and given all sorts of intelligence exposure so that they would be able to run a proper guerrilla movement. In 1971, when the Bangladesh war started, it was surprising that I received a requisition for weapons. The crackdown in Dhaka took place on the night of the 24th and 25th March 1971. And before the end of March, probably 28th or 29th, I got a requisition from headquarters asking me to collect all weapons which were not traceable to India, namely non-Indian and non-British weapons, rifles and submachine guns, whatever I could lay my hands on, and send them to a designated place. So from my area, I was able to supply more than 4,000 rifles cum submachine guns, and I sent them to Sarsawa Air Force Base in Saharanpur, from where they were airlifted around the first week of April 1971. What was surprising to me then was, and surprising to me even now, is that how come when the crackdown took place on the night of 24th and 25th, there was already a system in place in the government of India whereby they requisitioned weapons from me and many other officers of the SSB within less than a week. I was one of the 10 areas of Himachal, so the weapons that went from Himachal, you could say easily multiply by 10, and maybe 40,000 or more were sent from this area. Within a few days of sending the weapons, I got a requisition for instructors. So we had instructors who were trained in all the guerrilla techniques of ambush, raid, demolition, sabotage, and they were immediately dispatched, 3 of them, to unknown places. They were asked to report at Sarsawa Air Base. From there, I had no idea where they went. After a week or so, I got a requisition for 2 more instructors, so 5 of them went. It's only when they came back on leave that I realized where they had been, what they were doing. At that point of time, the SSB was running training camps in Salonibadi, Tezpur, and Haflong on the other side of Assam. In these camps, they had the Bangladeshi recruits from the Bhashani and the Mujib groups together. Unfortunately, because of the difference between the Bhashani and the Mujib factions, they were trained in different places, not trained together. So the Salonibadi camp in Tezpur had the Mujib group, whereas the Haflong camp had the Bhashani group. How they coordinated with the other groups, I have no idea, because those were matters of higher command and control. But this I know, that instructors and equipment was sent within days of the crackdown in Bangladesh. One outcome of this was that after the operations finished, in the month of February 1972, the SSB was declared a permanent organization, whereas earlier it had been a temporary organization. This was declared and announced at a function held in Delhi in February 1972, where the chief guest and the person announcing the decision was Mrs. Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India. So from there we can judge the contribution or the importance of the contribution of the SSB to the Bangladesh war. One of the heroes of the 71 war, as pointed out to me by my instructors, was General Shabik Singh. When they came back, they told me that there was an officer there who was probably a senior officer of the armed forces of the army, but they were not aware of what his full name was. Where he was just known as Shah Beg, and he had a ring in his ear. Much later on, I found out that was the famous, foreign famous General Shabik Singh, whom I subsequently had the coincidence to encounter during the Khalistan operations in Punjab. He was the one who commanded and led the Khalistani groups from inside the Golden Temple before and during Blue Star. After the 1962 war, this is information which is hearsay, not direct, but the fact is that on the Tezpur airfield, probably Jawaharlal Nehru and B.M. Malik, the famous intelligence boss of India, the head of the IB, they had a discussion with Biju Patnaik on some sort of a stay behind resistance so that in case the border was attacked again, there could be some sort of a stay behind guerrilla force which would fight afterwards. As a result, Biju Patnaik was given a room in the South Block in Delhi, from where he was there for a longish period, where the drafts for the SSB and the ITBP were made out. The reason for these two different organizations was that the ITBP was equipped and trained with American weapons. The SSB was equipped and trained with British weapons and instructors in both cases. So that the experience of the British in Malaya was used by the instructors to train the SSB, whereas the American experience in other parts of the world were used for the ITBP. Until the last British instructor left, you could see the style of functioning of the British was so different from the Americans, and hence the ITBP in equipment formation was a different organization from the SSB. So when weapons were asked from us, it was not difficult to procure weapons without Indian markings, because the SSB had weapons already from different organizations and the ITBP had American weapons. Subsequently, the Special Services Bureau, or the SSB, lost its rationale because one of the Prime Ministers of India decided that India will not indulge in guerrilla activities or cross-border activities on our borders. And the role has now been changed. It is merely a border guarding force with the Nepal border.
I'm Major Chandrakant Singh from 4 Guards, 1st Rajputs, who served under 4 Corps during the 71 operations. But my involvement, or my battalion's involvement with East Pakistan actually started long before. In 1968, my battalion was a part of a brigade located at a place called Thakurbari, which is near Tezpur, a part of 4 Corps. Our alternate operation role was, in case of need, to move into East Pakistan via the northern axis, that is, via Meghalaya into the Dhaka Bowl. Now, this was an axis which was also very successful during the 71 operations and taken up by what we call the 101 communication zone, which is based in Shillong. After our tenure in Thakurbari, my battalion moved to in the Mizo Hills. In Mizo Hills, we were facing a counter-insurgency by the Mizo hostiles, who were being trained, equipped and paid for by the Pakistanis. And sometime in February, March 71, I was tasked by my brigade and my battalion headquarters, battalion CO, to carry out a reconnaissance of the Mizo hostile camps located in the Rangamati hill ranges in East Pakistan, where about 2,000 of the Mizo insurgents were located and being trained by the Pakistanis for infiltration back into Mizo Hills. It is 6 months before this, or a year before this, East Pakistan had been ravaged by Cyclone Bhola, which caused the loss of hundreds of thousands of lives. The mishandling of the relief operations is what caused the entire turmoil in the Pakistani political setwork and gave a boost to the separatist movement of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. And when the elections took place, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman's party, the Awami League, won the elections hands down, and he should have been appointed the Prime Minister of a united Pakistan, which of course neither Bhutto nor Yahya Khan would allow. So things went into a turmoil. Before his arrest, on the 7th of March 71, Sheikh Mujibur Rahman more or less declared independence from Pakistan. Now it is very interesting. We have an intelligence summary written by a person called Colonel Taj Muhammad, who was the chief of the intelligence branch of the Pakistan Army in East Pakistan. This intelligence summary is dated 12th of March 71, in which Colonel Muhammad Taj says that the things have progressed so much that nothing that the government of Pakistan can do will prevent the parting of ways between the two halves of Pakistan, which means that the Pakistan leadership, or at least the intelligence services, were more or less convinced, and this 12th of March 71, that the two halves of the country will split into two. This is not surprising. In 1946, Abdul Kalam Azad, the famous freedom fighter and Nehru's colleague, when this call for the partition of the country came in, gave a statement that this is an artificial division, and in 25 years, within 25 years, the two halves will split. And this is exactly what happened. So it was more or less foretold that East Pakistan and West Pakistan will be split into two. I now return to my own story. When Sheikh Mujibur Rahman was arrested on the 25th of December, and on the 26th of December, then Major Ziaur Rahman, the second in command of an East Bengal regiment, went on Radio Chittagong and declared the open rebellion of the Bengali troops in the Pakistan Army. I was at that time located at an Assam Rifles post on bordering the Rangamati Hill ranges in the East Pakistan border. My task was to carry out recce's of where the Mizo hostile camps were located in East Pakistan. I had just begun the reconnaissance when, I think on the 29th or 30th of March, I was given orders to return to the battalion headquarters in Aizawl. On reaching there, we were briefed that the battalion has to move into Tripura. We moved into Tripura on the 2nd of April 1971, and on the 3rd of April, my battalion was moved to the southern part of Tripura to a place called Sabroom, which is the southernmost part of Tripura facing Chittagong area. The border in that area is defined by the Feni River. On the northern bank, on the Indian side, was Sabroom town, and on the southern side was the Pakistani town of Ramgarh. The 5th or 6th of April, two Bengali officers of the erstwhile East Pakistan Army, Major Ziaur Rahman and Captain Rafiq ul Islam, who had led the Bengali Armed Forces rebellion against element of the Bengali Armed Forces rebellion against the Pakistan Army, crossed over and came into my battalion's area. And for the next 3 months, they were located with us. Ziaur Rahman quite often shared my tent in the next 3 months. At that time, our own orders were not very clear as to what we were required to do, because the rebellion in East Pakistan had also caught us by surprise. We didn't know things would move so fast. But our main task at that time was to ensure that the Pakistan Army, in their actions against the Bengali freedom fighters, did not cross over to the Indian side, spill over, and also to provide some sort of protection to the Bengali refugees who had started pouring in. And it was a pathetic sight. Thousands and thousands of these Bengalis crossing over, some starving, some with even wounds on their bodies crossing over into our side. But our own role was very restricted. We had clear-cut orders that we were not to intervene. We were there only in case the Pakistanis tried to cross the border or fire across the border. This situation continued for about 3 months. In the first month, that is the month of April, the main fight was between the Bengali rebels of the erstwhile Pakistan Army against the rest of the Pakistan Army. By the end of April, the Pakistan Army had driven all the armed elements out of Bangladesh. That is when the fighting or the thing degenerated or changed into more of guerrilla actions, ambushes, and disruptions of the lines of communication. We were still not openly supporting them, nor were we giving them any material aid, to the best of my knowledge. But by June, I think we had started the training of some of the Bengali volunteers, giving them military training. By July, we had started a more proactive role, where our artillery had started firing across the border into then East Pakistan territory to disrupt wherever possible their road and rail communication. Particularly, there's a narrow belt, a neck, joining the rest of East Pakistan with the Chittagong Hill Tracts, Chittagong area. This is near something called the Feni Bulge. It's only about 15 or 20 kilometers wide, and the road and rail runs very close to our border, just about in places almost as close as a kilometer close to our border. And earlier it perhaps was about 2 or 3 kilometers deeper inside Pakistan, East Pakistan. But during the cyclone Bhola, those communications had been disrupted, and the Pakistanis had built roads and railway tracks closer to our border, which is on a higher ground. So from our side, we could observe in places the movement on the rail and road traffic, which we started interfering with our artillery fire and sometimes even with our machine gun fire. And several operations were carried out in support of the Mukti Bahini's operations inside Bangladesh, but we had no orders and we did not cross the border at all. By September, this situation continued, and there were several, and this whole operation was called from our side, Operation Windfall. Because this really fell into our lap without our planning, without our even knowing of it. It was a windfall for us. By September, we started taking a more proactive role and started supporting the Mukti Bahini operations along to capture some of the border outposts. By then, General Sagat's headquarters, General Sagat himself and his headquarters had also moved into Tripura. They were located at a place called Tilyamura. Now, Sagat's arrival in Tripura galvanized everybody. Because Sagat came with a formidable reputation. He, in Goa, against the Chinese at Nathula and Chola, then against the Mizo hostiles, he had always been in the forefront and been very successful. And he had a personality. He was a towering personality, 6 feet 2 inches or 6 feet 3 inches tall. And it galvanized us, and we definitely started becoming more aggressive in our things. By hindsight, at that time we did not realize it. When the orders started coming in for us to attack their border outposts and even capture them and not vacate them after capturing them, Sagat's plan was to force the Pakistani deployment, their concentrations where they were in the rear, in the depth areas, to deploy them in penny packets along the border and reinforce their border outposts, which were manned by paramilitary troops, by the regular troops. This paid very handsome dividends when the war started.
I am Brigadier Omkar Singh Goraya. During the 1971 Indo-Pak War, I was located at Agartala. My appointment was Brigade Major of 57 Artillery Brigade. That is, I was responsible for controlling the fire of all the regiments, all the guns within that brigade. In July, our division had started some operations with the help of Mukti Bahini to bite off some salients of the Pakistani, East Pakistan, jutting into Indian territory. These operations were carried out by Mukti Bahini, which had been trained by our army in different camps, but the Mukti Bahini needed artillery support, which was provided by the regiments of my brigade. So we started firing into what was then East Pakistan as early as July. A number of operations were carried out, a number of salients were bitten off. The most serious battle, as far as the nibbling operations, we call them nibbling operations. The most serious and the biggest operation was in a place called Dalai, which was a tea estate where we suffered a fairly large number of casualties, and so did the enemy. July onwards, when we were giving support to Mukti Bahini in the nibbling operations, though Mukti Bahini infantry, they were playing the role of the infantry and attacking, the artillery support was given by our guns. But it was realized at that time that the Mukti Bahini would be more happy if they also had their own artillery. The idea was mooted that we should raise an artillery unit of Mukti Bahini, out of the Mukti Bahini Jawans. Now, this task was given to 59 Mounted Regiment, whose CO was Lieutenant Colonel A.C. De Silva. He nominated 3 officers, Captain Mahadevan, Second Lieutenant Sanjeev Kapoor, and Second Lieutenant Rana. 3 of them, they were already located at a place called Bandabad in the Salda Nadi enclave, which was already captured by Mukti Bahini. That is where this battery was raised. Now, the manpower was found out of the various refugee camps. From there, young Mukti volunteers were picked up. They were initially given some training in general training in foot drill, and then they were trained on the guns Now these guns were discarded by our two regiments, 65 Mountain Regiment and 59 Mountain Regiment. These were 3.7-inch howitzers, which they were being discarded and sent back to the depots. Instead of sending them back to the depots, along with the ammunition, it was decided to raise this Mukti Bangladesh artillery unit with those guns. Now, within a matter of two months or less, I think it was 6 weeks, this battery, the first battery of 4 guns, was ready to fire and ready to take part in actual operations. For their training, they actually fired inside Bangladesh or East Pakistan at that time on light targets like the Pakistani patrols, Pakistani camps and their posts. They actually fired on light targets, and later on, when they were ready for the battle, they were sent off to training centers. And during the war, they played some role. Later on, this particular battery was amalgamated into the first regiment raised by Bangladesh Artillery, first field regiment. This battery was named First Mujib Battery, and this is still a proud unit of the Bangladesh Army.
I am Brigadier PK Ghosh, BRC VSM, commissioned in the Corps of Signals. I was called by our brigade commander, Parachute Brigade Commander, and Brigadier Matthew Thomas, that is, and he said that you need to go immediately to headquarters, the Eastern Command. The Chief of Staff, General Jacob, wants to talk to you. I had no inkling, and neither did Brigadier Thomas mention anything at all. I went there immediately and was ushered into General Jacob's office. I was surprised to see that there was nobody there except for him. There was no staff officer. I wonder what he had to do with the captain. He put me at ease, gave me a cup of tea, and took me to the maps which were hanging on the walls of his office. And he told me that something interesting is coming your way. And without divulging any secrets or any detailed information, he mentioned that sooner or later, push will come to shove, and as you can see, the winds of war are howling around us. As you will recall, 2 corps had commenced raising sometime in, I think, April or May under General Tapi Raina at Krishnanagar. Forces were being moved, war-like stores had been moved, everything was under preparation, and I couldn't be sure, but we were told that the Chief of the Army Staff wanted the monsoons to be over and the water in the rivers to recede a little bit, and that's the right time to start campaigning. That's what we were waiting for. He also said that the whole essence of the thing is that we must reach Dhaka as quickly as possible. And seeing the fact that there are 2 major rivers in the west and the east, their progress could be slowed down, and he was hedging his bets on the northern thrust. Because as soon as you cross the Brahmaputra, there's no other major obstacle on the way to Dhaka. And this is, he says, where your role comes in.